So that is how we modify elements of a given data frame. So suppose I want to add a new row in a data frame. I want to add a new row in a data frame. So suppose now the company decides and say, oh, let's bring Omar back, and yes, we need to add him because he is now not replacing anyone. So to add a new row, we will be using the rbind function. We'll be using the rbind function. So I'll be having a data frame B, and this data frame B will rbind, that will bind a row. What is it binding? The elements, the data frame A binding it to a row of a new list, and this list is having the ID of the fourth employee, the name, and the name is of course Omar, and the salary, and the salary, and let's say the salary is 65,000. The salary is 65,000. So we have bind the data frame A to the list that is having the details of Omar, and we are having a new data frame B. So when I print B, I'll be having the new row here entered as Omar being paid 65,000, and the employee ID is 4. Suppose I want to add a new column. I'll be using the cbind function. So I'll be using the cbind function. So suppose I want to add the city, or the city, or where this individual will be working, the places where this new individual will be working, as another column here, and say city, and I'll be having their names. So I'll be binding to a new data frame. So the new data frame, column bind B. What are we binding? We are binding the data frame B to city, to let's say city, to a city, and here we'll be having the name of the cities, the name of the places, or rather the places where these individuals are working. So let's say the first one is in Nyali, the second one is in Mombasa, the second one of course is Mombasa, the third one is let's say Kilifi, the third one is Kilifi, and the fourth is Kwale, the fourth is Kwale, and the fourth is Kwale. So we need to close the bind function. This one is closing here, and this one is closing that. We can have it afresh like that. Actually there is a mistake. We need to have Kwale with either the square bracket or the double quotation or the single, for the purpose of uniformity. So when I print C, I'll be having another column added, another column city added. So I'll be having the employee ID, the name, the salary, and the city, or rather the place they are working. Suppose I want to delete a column. It is very simple, just like we were doing in lists. You need to know the name of the data frame and the address of what you want to delete, the column you want to delete. So suppose I want to delete the second or the third column. I want to delete the salaries. So I can use the position 2, or I can use the $sign on the name, or I can use the square bracket and the name. So the $sign salary, I want to delete salary, and I say the $sign salary to null. I'm setting this to null like that. So when I print A, you realize A will be ID names without the salary, ID names without the salary. Rather, we could have used the square bracket here instead of the dollar sign. We could have used the square bracket here, and of course, but because it is not, we need to use the position. We need to use the position. We need to use the position of the salary. That is the column. And when I print A, you realize it has deleted the second here, and I'm having only one column remaining. So basically, that is how we create and manipulate a data frame. Of course, there are other ways of creating a data frame. Of course, there are other ways of creating a data frame. Like you realize, instead of having the data frame, like and the elements are listed in that data frame, we can start by listing the elements, then creating the data frame. Suppose I have students, the number of students, let's say 10 students, and we have their height and maybe their weight. We have their height and maybe their weight, and we need to create a data frame. I can come and start listing the number of students using the concatenating function, and say I'm having student 1, student 2, student 3, student 4, student 5, student 6, student 7, student 7, 8, 9, and 10, and 10. So that is my first element of the data frame, the first list in that data frame, the first vector in that data frame. Then I'll be having x. Let x represent maybe anything about the student. Could be the height or weight or whatever. So 5, 2, 9, 8, 3, 7, 3, 5, 3, 5, like that. Then we are having y, and y is also storing another attribute of the student. So we can have 0.1, we can have 0.3, we can have 0.9, we can have 0.1, we can have 0.4, we can have 0.3, we can have 0.7, we can have 0.5, 0.6, and 0.2. Very important. In order to form a data frame, the elements must be of the same length. So then I'll be forming a data frame for these three components of the student. So I'll be having data, and this data of the student actually is a data frame. So I'll be using the data.frame function, the data.frame function, to store these components of or rather the attributes of students. So I'll be having the student, maybe it is the student number, like that, as one of the element of data frame. Then I'll be having x, and I'll be having y, like that. And this, you realize, it is a data that stores all these attributes of the student. So when I call data, I'll be having student number x and y, student number x and y, stored as a unit. So instead of forming or rather listing the elements of every component of the student here in the data frame, you can as well start by having the elements listed individually. Then we come and form the data frame. Then we can form the data frame. So that is all about data frame. We will see in the next tutorial when we'll be just using data frame, lists, vectors, and matrices to carry out various operations. Like we'll be using the list, the data frame, to create statistical graphics. We will be using them to carry out maybe regression analysis and all that. All you need to do is to subscribe to this wonderful channel. Click the notification a bell and wait for the best